Alright, this video we're going to look at InDesign and just a quick overview of what InDesign has in its workspace and a few extra little things here. So I'm going to start off, here I am in InDesign. I'm going to go to File and New, or obviously we could do Command and make a new document. Now you can also do File, New, Book, and Library, but we're just going to start with a new document. You can create a book with this too, but this is what we're going to play around with first here. So just like InDesign Illustrator, we have our options of recent and saved and print presets and web presets and mobile presets. Now really, InDesign is a layout program. You can lay out anything here. You can go layout for web, layout for print. It's entirely up to you. I tend to focus on print, and it's got the same custom features here as it does in Illustrator and Photoshop. So if I'm going to set this up, I can name it properly. I'm going to use my units of measurement to inches. And 8.5 by 11 is fine. Orientation, obviously I can change that, not a problem. How many number of pages? That's an interesting one to start. That's something new. And a start number, that's something we don't normally see because now we're just dealing with layout in pages. So normally that wouldn't be a part of Illustrator or Photoshop. Facing pages is on. I'm going to click that off for now, but I'm going to show you what it does later. Primary text frame, that's something else when we're talking about many pages. Columns and column gutters. So normally we don't see this in Illustrator Photoshop. Once again, this is a layout program, so we're talking about if I want to start off with certain column structure, but I could always change that later, which I'll show you later. Our margins, so once again, Photoshop Illustrator do not have this option. I can set up my margins right here in my custom setup right away. My bleeds and slugs. Now bleeds we've seen before. We can set up our bleed. Our slug line is a little bit different. We don't have to worry about that right now, but there's also a bleed you can set up. Let me just set up bleed up really quickly, just to give us an idea of what it looks like so we can see the entire workspace. And I'm just going to press create, and that's it. So here I have. Now in Photoshop, this would be called a canvas. In Illustrator, this would be called an artboard, but in InDesign, it's called a page. These are pages we're dealing with. So here's my page, and I thought I set up my bleeds. Sorry, too far. Okay, there's my bleed. So what do I see in my workspace? I see a little bit of a thinner gray workspace. Anything on the other side here, the lighter gray, is nothing. You cannot put anything here. InDesign will let you know, like, no, you can't put anything out there. It's not going to work. So here I have this great workspace, a little bit smaller, but definitely more than enough room to work with most things that I need. If I want to put something on the workspace, I can. And if I don't want it on the page, I don't need to put it there. But this is it. So the red line obviously would be my bleed line. This purplish kind of line, it's kind of a little pinkish, pink here, pink there, and purple here and purple here. That is our margin. So it's already set up for us, but we could change that later, which I'll show you. So this is all I'm looking at right now, but you can see it has very, very similar to Illustrator. Similar tools, I have a black arrow and a white arrow, which is also seen in Photoshop, but these are our primary tools here in InDesign. Page tool, so you can change up the actual dimensions of the individual pages, text tool, line tool, the pen tool with all its options as well, which we've also seen in Illustrator and Photoshop, a pencil tool with a few extra options there, our frame tool. This is one of the biggest things about Photoshop, InDesign that is different than Illustrator and Photoshop. However, Photoshop has introduced a frame tool into its tool panel, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But this is the way InDesign works. This is one thing you need to learn, and then you'll totally understand InDesign and how it works. Then you have your shape tools, rectangle, ellipse, polygon. So a little, much fewer than Illustrator, but more than enough that we need. Some other options here: free transform, scissors, gradient swatch, and gradient feather. But there's other options to create some effects. And then some other normal tools that we normally see, but we could also control with our keyboard. So going back here, we're looking at, just like Illustrator, we have our fill and we have our stroke. We have our flipping if we want to swap them out, and very, very simply there. And in this situation, just like on our large control panel here, we have a lot more options. It kind of looks overwhelming or a little bit more, but not at all. All these options are available in some of these panels too. So these are just quick access things to get to. So we never have to worry about that. But you can see that sometimes we're working with shapes and sometimes we work with text. So if you want formatting effects for container or shapes, or formatting effects for type, that's kind of how it works. And even the fill and stroke will change on that too, showing that you're working on type, and this is the stroke or the fill for it, this is the stroke. If you work on shapes, this is the fill for it, and this is the stroke. And then once again, just like in Illustrator, we have our fills, apply color, gradient, or none. And then a few other options here, which I'm going to get into later. So what we're looking at mainly in InDesign are pages. And we have one page here right now, but I could also add multiple pages. I could add insert another page. And a few different options here. Just like every Adobe CC program, you have your little drop downs with everything. I have our layers panel. Layers in InDesign work just like in Illustrator, so very, very similar, not like Photoshop at all. So Photoshop is very different from that. Links, just the same as in Illustrator. You could have your different links here. Majority of the things we're going to link are linked. They are not embedded. So that is a very common thing in InDesign, is to link things. It wants to link things right away. It does not want to embed. You have to force things to be embedded. In the properties panel, just like all the new programs, Illustrator InDesign, it has this new properties panel, which gives you quick access to many different things. I'm actually going to drag that one out. Just like we can in all our Adobe CC programs, drag the panels around, move them wherever you want. I'm going to keep this open so we can see some of that quick access to the things that we can get. Okay, so starting off, what I see here is I have all my normal panels that I would get. Once again, all these panels, everything you see here is available under Windows. Are available under Windows. You can see that there are a lot of different panels you can choose from. However, not as many as Photoshop and Illustrator. There are many fewer panels here. But remember, InDesign is a layout program. It's much simplified. It's very nice. It only gives you the things you need. If you want to create some vector graphics, go to Illustrator. If you want to do some raster image editing, go to Photoshop. This is just going to place them in. You're going to lay them out. There's still a lot of great functionality you have in InDesign, especially with styles, cell styles, character styles, object styles, paragraph styles. Well, table and cell styles are a little bit specific to tables, but character styles and paragraph styles are huge in InDesign. We're going to get into that obviously in another video, but definitely later on. Okay, so just really quick, some basic ideas here. I was also wanting to look at just starting something off here. I have my new file. I click and drag something here. Okay, there is my object. Why do I have that weird effect on it? There we go, normal. Great stuff. This is just a shape. It's a rectangle. It has a black fill, has no stroke. I can vice versa that, just flip that around. Now I have a black stroke, no fill. We know the basic concepts there. The other thing here, if you want to round these areas, there's two ways to round these objects. So I can just click on this yellow box here, and all of a sudden I have options to round the corners, and I can click and drag and it shows me the radius there of what I want. Or another option, if I go to object and I go to corner options, here I have some corner options as well, some different ones I could play around with. Or obviously here in my property panel, I can do that. So the property panel is always really nice. The second you select something, it'll give you properties for that. It'll give you options if you want to change the stroke, the corner, opacity, add some effects, different things like that. Now, when it talks about effects, there's only so many effects we have here in InDesign, but they are actually really, really good effects. Drop shadow, inner shadow, underglow, background boss, inner glow, different feathering. Really, really actually strong tools in InDesign to play with vectors. Very useful, but once again, you may or may not use them here. You may want to create a certain effect in Photoshop or Illustrator and then bring it in and kind of go from there. The alignment panel, same idea. If I have this working, it works just like in Illustrator, the alignment panel, but this time I have a few more options to align to selection, align to key object, which is one of my faves, align to margins, but now you can align to page or align to spread. So I'll talk about that in just a minute too. First, what I want to look at is the Pages panel. The Pages panel is very important here. We're going to, just like the Layers panel in Photoshop, where you're always working with your Layers panel just as much as your artboard. Well, in InDesign, your Pages panel is really, really important too. So here I have my one page. I'm working on my one page, and that's great. But here I also can add more pages by clicking on down here, this little plus sign, or I can actually insert pages and do that. Let me just add a few pages here and see what happens. So I'm going to add 7 more pages. I got 8 pages altogether. If I zoom out, this is how they look. This is how they're stacked. They're not side by side, like one here and one there, or in a Illustrator I can move them all around. No, they have a very specific area. This is how they work. But within that page, you can do anything you want. So this is the normal structure we have there. If I want to delete some pages, select them, that's fine. I can hold down Command or to select more, or hold down Shift if I want to select a certain amount in a row and just delete those. That's up to me, it doesn't really matter. Now this is what we call these are single pages. So this is a single page, this is a single page. But as of right now, this is a multi-page document because there are 2 pages. Now if I want to create a book, something that has facing pages where they face each other, there's a spine and they can fold into one another. That's called facing pages. And what I could just do is go to File, Document Setup. And I could actually get my facing pages back, just like at the original opening where I would file a new document. I had the choice to add facing pages. Now watch what happens when I click on facing pages. I'll say, okay, now they're facing. Well, that doesn't really look like they're facing. Well, it's actually creating a cover. And now it's going to have the inside page. Let me show you how they face. It even shows you a little spine here. That's where the spine is. I'm going to add a new page. And now those ones are facing that again, and that again, and that again. If I just add one down here, well, that's my back cover, or what we consider that back cover, and that's my front cover. And these are the inside pages that face each other. So this is what we call facing pages. If I'm just working on a poster or a business card or something simple like a flyer, I don't need facing pages. I just take facing pages off. It doesn't matter. It's document setup. Facing pages, I take it off. Okay, and now they all go back to single pages. That's all. Very simple. File, document setup. Yes, I am making a book. I do want them to be together for whatever reason. Facing pages and now they're back together. That's totally fine. And that's how we lay them out. Now, here's an interesting one too. If I like, let's pretend I like that this square, the rectangle is set up there. Great. I'm going to copy that. Now, here's something what we have. It's also called master pages. Right here are my pages, and I can see that they're highlighted. This is blue. This is blue. That's great. They're blue. They're blue. They're blue. But notice how the number's not blue. Only this number's blue. That means I'm still active on the page 1. If I want to be active on page 8, I can just double click I'm not active on page 8. And so what I can do now, I'm going to go to master page. I click on master page, but watch what happens there. I just click on it. It doesn't mean it's active. I'm not on master pages. But watch what happens when I do double click on a master. Now I'm active on master pages, and whatever I do on the master page directly affects all the pages that are connected to it. Here I can see a little letter A, letter A, letter A. I see it on all the pages. That A master is connected to each of these master pages, or each of these inside pages. Sorry, I actually call these the live pages. So anything I put here, like this rectangle, look, it suddenly appears on every single page. So master pages are a great way to add something that is going to appear on every single page, and then I only have to worry about designing it here on the master page. Then when I go back to my live pages, I actually can't select them. They are static, they don't move. Now if I really wanted to say, on page number 8, I don't need that, I could just press Command and Shift, and it releases it from the master page. I could delete it. It's still on the master page, and it's still on all these other pages, but here it disappears. So that was Command, Shift, and click on whatever you want. I'll do it again here, Command, Shift, click, and I can delete it from just that page, release it from the master page. But on these pages, it's still there. So the master page actually provides some pretty great options to put something on this page that will appear on all the pages. So if I just wanted some type, let's say there was going to be a title. Now when I use my type tool in InDesign, I can't just click. If I just click, it does not allow me to do anything. I have to click and drag. InDesign only works with type boxes or text frames. So here's my frame, here's my type box, whatever you want to call it. And I can just type in, say, title. And let me make it a little bit bigger. I could either go here for my quick access control panel, or I can go here to my property panel, or I can go here to my character panel, my full character panel, and I have all the options here to change it. Obviously, different typeface if I want. Let's just let it go for now, and I can go to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, there's my title, and look what happens. Obviously, we can see it appears on all our pages that's connected, which all of them are connected. So I see that there. So if you have something that you want to keep on every page, but you only want to really design it once, we can do that here on the A master page. And you can make many other A master pages, you can make other master pages, so now it becomes a B master. I'll say okay. And on the B master, because I originally had it at, that these are facing pages, it shows me 2 facing pages. So this is what you call a spread. So facing pages are 2 of them together, obviously 2 pages together, it's called a spread. So here on this one, let's say I make a circle, change up the color, go to my swatch panel or my color panel, and there's my circle, and I can do that there. Now, as you see, those circles do not apply to any of these because the B is not connected to any of these these inside pages, live pages. So all I have to do is click and drag and say, yeah, I want to connect this now to B. And I want to connect this now to B. And now those ones, if I double click on these ones, now I'm on these pages. And those ones are connected with those to the B. So here I have access, if I double click on my master page, I can see that this is highlighted blue, this is blue. If I just click on one of these, a live page inside, that does not mean I'm out of master pages. I'm still in master pages. I have to double click. And now I'm back to my live pages, and now I can work with those, okay? So I'm just gonna delete all these. Delete the B page, and there we go. And I'll just go to my master page and clear it out. Now, another great thing to do here on the master page is also to set up your columns and guides. So we can go to layout, margins and columns, and here's some guides. There's some things I could do. So top and bottom margins, I could make sure they're not chained together if I wanted. Say, I want my top to be a little less and my bottom to be a little less, and I wanted my insides to be a little bit more for whatever reason. However you're laying your grid out or your layout, you might find something works better for you. I can start adding columns if I want to add columns. Let me zoom in a little bit, Command plus, and I can start adding a certain amount of columns, and I can actually change out my gutter if I wanted to. There's also a newer option here to adjust the layout width as you change, but I'm not a huge fan of that. However, it's possible. So if I already had something laid out and I started changing this, InDesign would automatically try to understand the layout and change it for me. But that's okay. So once I've done this and I press OK, now this page automatically has all those there too. Now I've added a few more pages. Once again, they're connected to A right away automatically, and I have that option. But let's just say for some reason on this page, I'm on page 4, I don't want that layout like that. I want it to be, for some reason, let's go even less just to really see the difference. Okay. Now this page is connected to A master. They're also connected to A master, but this one has a separate layout, separate grid, margin, column layout, which is still connected to the A master, but it has its own special structure, which is totally fine, and you can do that. Now, if I say, you know what, I want it to be like this again, I could actually just once again click and drag the A right onto it, and it goes back to normal like that. So there's a lot of functionality here that we have, which is really, really great. The next one I wanted to look at was, so where Pages panel, we kind of figured that out, the Swatch panel. So the Swatch panel looks very, a little bit different than we normal seeing in Illustrator or Photoshop, but I could also make it look back the way that it does in Illustrator, especially Illustrator. Swatches I could do small, but I could also do small thumbnail, and that's kind of what we're used to seeing in Illustrator. But once again, I like the idea that I could see, actually I'll just do small list. I like the fact that I can see all the different swatches available to me, their names, and once again, down here, I can actually see that they are process colors. I can see that they are CMYK colors. So that's kind of important to me, especially when I'm laying things out for print. It's good to know what colors are what, and obviously adding Pantones and adding RGBs and adding all that, I'm able to do that, but also change them too. So if I have this black color and I made it this standard red, and if I double click on that, once again, I have options. I can actually change this to a spot color, which I wouldn't do right now, but it could be changed. I could change it to an RGB, but look at this right away. I have access to my Pantones too. My Pantone solid coded. I could actually change and add a Pantone color. I could type in the number, or I could scroll down and just find a Pantone that works for me. I'll say OK, and automatically that color gets changed to my Pantone, and it even names it properly, what it actually is. And it also shows here that the icons change. This is now a Pantone. I have the Pantone here, and I have a spot color because Pantones are normally spot colors. So I have that as well. So that's an option there. You could really play around with your swatch panel. I'm also going to open up my color panel window, color, and I have some options here. Gradient swatches, Adobe color themes. I'm just going to go to color, and I have options to look at any color in CMYK, RGB, or obviously this one was lab, this one was the Pantone, so that would be there. I could change up whatever I want. Okay, so the color panel works that way too, similar to Illustrator, and I'm just going to click and drag and get that into. Okay, so there, leave that there. My stroke panel the same. I can change that. I have a lot of options here. The style of line I want, so I'm just going to bring my line tool in and see what I'm doing here. I'm pressing W on my keyboard. By pressing W, I'm actually changing between preview mode and normal mode. And pressing W is obviously much quicker. What it does, it just gets rid of all the lines, your guidelines, your grid, your everything set up, and you just get to look at the artwork specifically, which is really nice. I love using that. So I'm just going to press my line tool, click and drag a line, and I'm just going to give it a stroke. Whatever stroke, doesn't matter. There it is, and I'll make it black. That's fine. And I'm going to up the weight. Okay, and now I can change up the different type I want a stroke here. But the most important one I feel is that the dotted line. I have access to the dotted line. I have access to the dashed line, but once I click on dash, I have options here to change up the dash and the gap, which is common. I could add arrows if I want to add arrows to the ends, or different types of shapes. They have these different types of shapes here. So options that we don't normally see in Illustrator, now we have them here in InDesign, which is really, really nice. I'm going to bring the pages back up here, reconnect it. There I go. Okay, so very simple stuff. We're working with rectangles and shapes, and working with line tool. The pen tool works the exact same way as it does in all the programs. Here it works very simply, and it works quite well, just like in Illustrator. But obviously Illustrator, you have a few more options, but in InDesign you're able to create those graphics too, something that you need. The next thing I want to look at is looking at how we play with bringing in different graphics, because obviously it's a layout program and I can make all this great stuff and put all my type in here, my vector type, and play with shapes and play with lines and all this. But what if I want to bring an image in? Well, that's quite simple. That's all I have to do is, what I like to do first is create a placeholder for it first. So now me, personally, I like to use the shape tools. I'll usually use the rectangle tool. And let's just say I wanted to fit it into here. That's fine. Now the other option, realistically, you could also use, I gotta get rid of this, is the frame tool. Now the frame tool does the exact same thing. I never use the frame tool, I just use the shape tool. So either one of these, you can actually place an image in. So let's try both. So I'm gonna click on this one, and I'm gonna go to File and Place. This, just like in Illustrator, this is how we link images into our program. So I'm gonna place the image in, and I have one on my desktop right now that I've been using for a bit. I'll go to my desktop and I will find the image here. Now, this is a bit of an issue because this image is not CMYK, it's not 300 pixels per inch. I'm just grabbing it. I should make it proper in Photoshop, but I'm not. I'm just trying to show you how to place images in rather quickly. So there's my image. Now it doesn't fit properly. Like I said, Photoshop, I'll fix that. And that's it. That's how you place an image. Now the image is inside of this object, which happens to be a rectangle. Now it is the same thing for the frame. File, Place. I'll find the same one and I'll go, okay, open. And there it is. It's the exact same thing, except the frame doesn't really have anything attached to it, any colors, which you can obviously. I could actually just make it black, and then it's the exact same thing. So I just like using shapes as opposed to the frame tool. You can still get ellipses, polygons, the shapes. You can put a picture inside any frame or any shape. So the frame tool to me is a little redundant because I'm always used to using the shape tools. Either way, it doesn't matter. Just so you know that frames work that way too. Now here's something very important about frames or pictures inside of things in InDesign. The picture here, if I'm right now I'm clicking on the picture, this object, I'm not actually accessing the picture. I'm just accessing the thing that the picture's inside, which we can call a frame. And I'm moving that around, and that's all well and good. Well, what if I want to move the picture around? Well, in order to do that, I need a couple ways to do it. I could either click on this little circle that shows up when I hover over it, and now I'm accessing the picture. Now look what happens. It actually shows me an orange line around the picture. And I can move it around, I can rotate it, I can scale it up, which I shouldn't do. I can scale it down, which that's okay. I gotta hold down Shift to keep it in proportion. I can do a few different things. Now the other way, once again, this is the most important thing to learn about InDesign. If I click on the object once, I'm accessing the frame. If I double click on it, I'm accessing the picture inside of the frame. Okay, I can move around inside the frame. And it also acts like a kind of a mask where I can actually hide part of the picture. I don't have to show the whole thing. I can actually hide parts of the picture just by clicking it outside of the frame. But once again, if I click on the frame, I'm just clicking on the frame once. If I double click, I'm accessing the content inside of the frame. Here it happens to be a picture. Okay, now I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, this frame is too big for this picture. So what we can do is right click and go to something called fitting. A lot of options here. Fill frame proportionally, fit content proportionally. There's a few different ones. But what I want the frame to fit the content. So fit frame to content. And now look at that. My frame fits my content properly. Now there's a few different options as I mentioned, but you pick the one that works for you. There I go. I'll line it up in my grid here, and there is my setup there, which is totally fine. Now, another thing we can do, now these are raster graphics. Raster graphics can only be linked in. Well, the thing I do not recommend is opening your image in Photoshop, which is totally fine to do. I would say that you do not copy this. I'm going to shut off that. Copy this. I'm going to do a Command A to select all. I'm going to Command C to copy, and I'm going to Command V. And there it is. Now let me look at my links panel here. This is really, really big, so I'm going to shrink it down. Okay. Now, this image I placed in properly. This image does not exist in my links panel. The links panel, just like in Illustrator, shows me if something's embedded, if something is linked. It shows me I have access to all the different things here, but a lot of information about the picture. So here I see this one. Yes, that's the name of it, and it's a JPEG, which should probably be a TIFF. It should be CMYK. It tells me all that information. It should be 300 pixels per inch. The effective is 620 because I shrunk it down, so that's good too. The pixel dimensions, 4,000 by 3,000. Okay, it tells me all this information, where it's from, and all that great stuff. This image tells me nothing. It is linked in. I know nothing about it. I don't know if it's RGB, CMYK. I don't know if it's 300 pixels per inch. I don't know anything about it, and that's not good. So right now, it's telling me this picture is embedded. So copying and pasting an image, especially a raster graphic, from another program, especially Photoshop, is not a good thing to do. We should always file and place in our images, okay? So that is just something I do want to mention. Never copy and paste an image directly from Photoshop into InDesign. Not a good idea, even in Illustrator either. Now the thing we can do though, like in here, I'm in Illustrator now, I am copying and pasting a vector graphic, not a raster graphic, a vector graphic. So I'm just going to copy and paste this one here, Command C, go into InDesign, Command V. And look at that, perfect. This is a vector program, just like Illustrator is. So copying a vector from one vector program to another vector program is totally fine. So, however, there are some issues that come with that, but in the meantime, generally speaking, it is totally fine. I scale it up nicely. I can do whatever I want with that, okay? So, bringing in vectors now, if you bring in a complex vector, it's usually going to flatten it and embed it. And that's fine too. It's still going to be a vector. It's going to be vector quality, but you can't play around with it as much. So this one right here, because it's just a normal vector from Illustrator, I could actually bring in, and it brought in the swatch color too, that Pantone swatch color I had from Illustrator. So this image had a swatch color attached to it. Well, it brought it into the swatch library as well, which is actually really, really great. If I want to change it, I can. Okay, but if I were to place this in as a vector, I would not be able to do that. So let me show you that right now. Go to Illustrator. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to make a new document. Say create. I'm going to paste this in, and I'm going to save this file. Save as. I can save it as a few different options on my desktop. I can save it as an AI, that would work. Save it as an EPS, that would work as well. You can even bring it in as a PDF, but for now, let's just say an EPS. I'm going to bring that. I'm going to say logo, and I'm just going to put it on my desktop and save. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to InDesign, and I'm going to place it in Command D or File, Place, and I'm going to show you where to go. Let me see. Logo. There we go. Okay. Open, and there it is. I placed it in. There it is. Perfect. Now I can size it up. That shouldn't be a problem. But it is inside of a frame now. It's not on its own, because everything in InDesign is inside of a frame, except for vectors. Text is inside of a frame. Raster images are inside of a frame. But vectors on their own do not have to be inside of a frame. But a linked file that is a vector is inside of a frame. Okay? So once again, to access just the frame, click on it once. To access the content inside the frame, double click on it. So I could do that, and if I want to scale it up, I can. Oh, it's a little too big. That's okay. I'm going to go here, click on it, and fitting, and fit frame to content, and there we go. I can actually make that a little bit like that. However, if I want to change the color of this, I cannot. It's not what I like to call a live vector. It's a flattened vector file, and I can't change the color of it. I try to change the color of it. I change it. No, it just changes the frame color. If I try to change the color of this live vector, I can actually do that. Even with my white arrow tool, I can select individual vector areas and color those differently if I want to color those differently. So there are benefits to copying and pasting a vector directly from Illustrator into InDesign. You can play around with it certain ways. but there also are cons. If I were to bring in a complex vector, it would flatten it anyways. If I bring in gradients or certain stroked images, vector images with strokes or gradients, sometimes they do not render properly. So then the option is, the foolproof is to just bring it in as a linked image or a flattened file, a flattened vector, and that's totally fine too. It still has the quality, but it's just not a live vector where you can change colors or do different things like that. The other thing I want to talk about here is resizing an image here. So if I have this image, what I could do is like, oh, I want to shrink it down. Oh, if I shrink it down, remember, I'm just accessing the frame. That's not what I wanted to happen. If I just wanted to move the frame around, that's totally fine. But if I want to move the image around with the frame at the same time, so both at the same time, I can go up to my control panel here and just play around with the scale tool. I can see that they're both linked, that's fine, and I'm just going to shrink it down. Well, why is it shrinking it down to this corner? Well, that's the corner that's selected. If I want to shrink it down to the center, I'll click on the center point, and then I'll shrink it down, then it would shrink to the center. Okay. The other way to do this is holding down Command. All right, and that will move it for you as well. However, it doesn't do it proportionally, which is not good. So how do we do that proportionally? We hold on Command and Shift. So if I hold on Command and Shift, it will actually select the edge, the frame, and the content inside the frame and scale it properly at the same time. That's it. So Command and Shift, I'm moving that around. That's what I want to do. Once again, if I do not hold anything down and just click and drag, I'm only playing with the frame. Holding down Command moves the frame and the content around at the same time, but make sure you hold down Shift as well, so it's scaled proportionally. Picture inside, especially. Okay. The next thing I wanted to look at were how to save this properly, and that is ideal because InDesign does things a little bit different. Let me go to my Pages panel. I don't need this page. I don't need this page. And I'm just going to go back and click off of facing pages. Okay. Now I'm just back to that, which is totally fine. And if I'm going to save this, I'm going to File, Save As. And what it does for me, it only allows me to save an InDesign document, a template, or an IDML. It doesn't allow me to save it as like in Illustrator as a PDF or all these different things. You can only save it as a native file format, which is INDD. So if I go here, I'm just going to say Setup, and I will say it's an InDesign file. That's totally fine. Desktop, save. If I want to, which I'll need to, save it as something else, I have to export it. So I'll have to File, Export as another option. And look at all the options I have here to export. PDF, normal, print, interactive. I can save it as an EPUB or an EPS, an HTML document, so I can set up some HTML here. An InDesign markup with the IDML, which is the exact same as saving as an IDML. A JPEG, a PNG, or an XML. So there are a lot of different options here to export as. You can only save an InDesign file as an INDD, but you can export it as a few different things. Okay, so there is a little bit of a difference between file saving and file exporting. So a couple different options there. Those are the most important things to talk about here. There are, once again, all these other different panels you could look at that we are familiar with in Illustrator. Align panel, the Pathfinder. Now Pathfinder, there's a lot less here compared to the Illustrator version of it. There's some simple ones here, and converting to shapes and certain paths and converting points, but once again, not as robust as Illustrator. The paragraph panel, really much more here in the paragraph panel than there is in Illustrator or Photoshop for that matter. So there's a lot more control over type. There's a lot more control over layout in InDesign than there is in any other program. And that's why it's such a strong layout tool, layout software to use as opposed to any other software out there. Really diverse, really great. You still have your access to different workspaces if you want to use different workspaces. Save your own or use one of the presets, which is totally fine, but I like to just use my own, drag out what I need. My tool panel, all laid out, and obviously using the control panel for quick access to certain things. There's a lot more than we're covering right now, but I just wanted a quick overview of InDesign and what's available to you there.